All right, everyone, we're going to get started. I'll do a quick intro myself in case there's anyone that doesn't know who I am, but maybe before I do that, if you stumbled upon this and have no idea what we're talking about, today we are actually talking about how to scale content quality in a way that helps you win for AI answers. And usually the way I kind of think about it is, how do we create content that is credible, that is comprehensive, and stays fresh in a way that not only helps you win with AI answers, but also builds credibility and trust with your audience. So that's kind of a little bit of the trick here and what we're trying to do. And so with that, before I introduce myself, I'll let Jason introduce himself as well.
Yeah, my name's Jason. I lead growth here at GrowthX, and I spend every day working with our customers here and also growing GrowthX, the company. Past founder, really technical, and I've been working on AI products since 2018. And then I'll just end with like the stuff we'll show today might feel like a little different than other things you've seen. It's not like a flashy demo or like AI tools where like the workflows feel like a bowl of spaghetti, it's like more foundational. It's like simple tools that you use every day already. But just know that like, for some of the biggest customers we work with, and we'll show a slide, Webflow, Ramp, Abnormal, Augment code, like this is almost always like what we start in. And this is what can get you results, like it's not the tool, it's kind of this foundational stuff of how to think about using AI. And then ask questions. I'll be in the chat basically the whole time as Marcel's talking, and I'll answer as many things as I can.
Yeah, so drop questions in the chat as we go along, and Jason might kind of stop me, and we're going to go from there. But super quickly, background on me, CEO here and co-founder at GrowthX, and a little bit of my journey. I've been building publications and organic engines, growth engines for a lot of different brands, from large enterprises like IBM all the way to companies that ended up going public, from startups like HashiCorp, ServiceTitan, or Scale AI. And prior to GrowthX, I was at DeepGram, and every step of the way, just helping brands be more like publishers and grow organically. So content is not a new thing because of AI answers for us. I think AI answers just changes some of the distribution and the way we kind of think about where the conversation and the funnel starts, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But all right, what are we going to cover today? Super quickly, TLDR on what's happening in case you've been living under a rock. I won't spend too much time there. And then we're going to recap a few things that we cover in the last webinar or the last workshop, where we have a 2-hour recording. So we'll send it along in case any of you missed that. But we'll recap just a little bit of kind of how to set the right context and actually go a little bit more hands-on than last time. And then we're going to go step by step on how to scale content quality. And I'm actually going to run through some examples with you live and also show you how we do it in a more robust way. And hopefully there's some learnings both ways, like the more simplistic, using Claude and ChatGPT, some prompts, Perplexity, some research, how to generate those artifacts. And then if we have time, we can cover some success stories and some things we've seen work, and leave some time for Q&As. And if we need to run over, I'm happy to as well. So hopefully we'll cover everything. But how does that sound?
Good.
All right, let's do this. So we are, I think, experiencing, I would argue, the most significant shift to ever happen in marketing for marketing teams and just how we go to market. And so for us, the way we're seeing that happen is not only from my perspective, as I was CMO for several years, but also I've talked to over 200 CMOs. We work with 50 plus top brands and companies. We talk to a lot of investors. We talk to a lot of founders and a lot of leaders. And I think this shift was already somewhat happening for the last few years, but it just feels like it got accelerated even more recently, which is ultimately ads are getting more expensive. Markets and categories are getting more and more noisy. And so every brand is having to shift from the mentality of I can just quickly rent attention, aka ads, to I need to own my audience and I need to build authority with my audience and credibility with my audience. And people are not starting at my website or in a search. They are starting in a answer or in a conversation with different AI tools out there, right? And then from an execution, what we're hearing quite a bit is that large teams don't want to be large teams anymore. Almost no one is hiring large teams anymore. Not to say that big companies don't need it, but I think there's this kind of like burnout of just massive teams that move slower and actually produce less than smaller teams, and just like agencies and vendors that don't move fast enough, to where I think people are just trying to figure out, okay, how do I build AI systems and have experts in the loop that allow me to scale productivity and scale the outcomes in a quality way? And how do I not go and buy 50 more tools because we already have 50 that we're juggling, right? And how do I focus on outcome and what will drive more outcomes? And so for us, that shift obviously is accelerated by the fact that AI answers are arguably disrupting every single website in the planet. It's a board meeting conversation now. Every CEO, every investor is hitting us up. And so there's no way to ignore it. And the way we kind of think about it, I mentioned this last time, is you have billions and billions of people that shifted their behavior. Instead of clicking around in 10 crappy blue links and spending 30 seconds on each and trying to fetch information, they're really kind of shifting their pattern, how they behave, and spending maybe 15, 20 minutes on average interacting with these answers. And the pattern that we're seeing is almost like they consider these answers word of mouth from an expert, which is insane, right? But whether that's good or bad, that's just the reality, where if they read a recommendation that's personalized to them, they're almost considering it and internalizing that the same way they would if they talk to an expert friend that recommends and says the same thing, right? And so now the impact to brands is even bigger, because if they're not part of that recommendation, or if they're positioned poorly in that recommendation, then they either don't exist or won't have a shot on goal. So it's almost like your first sales call is happening there. But then on the counter side of that is what we're seeing is brands that are responding to it, creating high quality content, but also moving fast. We've seen cases where a piece of content might show up in an AI answer within 24 hours and completely change how a brand is perceived in those answers, right? And so then the quality of the traffic that does come to a brand's website is 3 to 5 times more valuable and tends to convert, and they tend to spend longer as well, right? And so to back it up, the way we think about content and as it relates to AI answers is like content earns the attention you need, but then the quality builds trust. And if you build trust the right way with your audience, then you can drive distribution and own your own distribution. And that's how you eventually drive growth and real revenue for your business, right? And so just to kind of give a visual really quickly here, this is an example of Ramp, one of our customers. We've been working with them for over a year, and we've done the majority of their content outside of some of the work that the internal teams do. And we've done so many different things with them, and they've been a great partner to work with. But if you search expense card platform, for instance, you can see their #1 sponsor ad, and they're also #1 organically. But then now maybe the behavior is changing, where maybe someone is saying, hey, I'm a finance manager at Webflow. I just use Webflow because we love Webflow. They're one of our customers as well. And I'm trying to figure out how to have my team spend less time sorting through transactions and more time strategically figuring out where to deploy our capital and our resources. Who are the best vendors and platforms out there? Create a guide for me and decide which one is the best solution based on my company, right? That is very detailed. No one would ever put that in a search box, but now they are. And so in this example, Ramp is not only cited, and by the way, it's not even their homepage cited here. It's actually an article we created for them called How to Automate Expense Reporting in 5 Steps. And you can see leading platforms, the #1 that shows up on the list is Ramp, not Brex. And then recommended best fit for Webflow, it says Ramp, right? Now, this was we're trying to impact this answer, but we don't have full control of this answer. But this is how things are changing, right? And that's why this is becoming way, way more dynamic than before, because it's no longer like a high level piece of content solution page only. It's really like, how do you create content that taps into some of the nuances of the description that your audience and the context that your audience has, right? And so to summarize, and then we'll get into the hands-on part, the way we're thinking about it, and I think it's a good way to think about it, is your first sales calls now happens inside of an AI answer, right? If someone's spending 15 to 20 minutes researching something and getting answers back and forth, then that's the equivalent of a sales call. And so if you're not in the answer and you're not systematically being the best answer that gets cited and mentioned in the answers, you simply do not exist, or you're irrelevant, or you're seen in a very negative way, right? But then winning requires credible, comprehensive, fresh content at scale. But the main challenge we're seeing is that as we've tried to scale this, and as we're working with all these brands, we publish over 10 million words. We're driving millions of visitors to different customer websites, and is that scaling is really hard. And I've been doing this for 15 years. Every single step of my career, I build these content programs, and we're lucky to be able to tap into AI. But we'll show you a little bit of the process of, if you simply go into ChatGPT, Claude, or just use any model, you're going to get generic, inaccurate, and off-brand responses. And then you're just like massaging and shaping and wrestling with it to try to get it to a good place. And it almost becomes counterproductive. Then a lot of the visibility tools, even though they might claim that, hey, we're going to actually help you grow your visibility, they are pointing the gaps and maybe at a high level telling you some ideas of how to go tap into and close those gaps, but they're not actually doing the work for you, right? And so you still need to figure out, like, what am I going to do about it? How do I create content to actually impact my visibility? And then workflow platforms, like, we've used them before in the past, like last year, and a lot of the issues with it, and again, like, there's a lot of great things you can build there, so it's not an either or, but they're brittle and a lot of times require full-time engineering. And then hopefully today, even if you're using workflow platforms, you can get some tips and some advice on how to get your prompts to be right, your inputs, your context, right? And so what we're hearing often is that teams are really drowning, and they're so focused on how quickly AI is evolving and so much on the tooling that the productivity and the outputs are not going up. And that's hopefully what we're trying to help a little bit here. And again, everything we're going to show is not about our services. I want to show you kind of how we work, so that you can actually try to apply that as well, right? And the way we think about it is 4 layers: is strategy, workflows, experts in the loop, and execution. And so with that, like, whether you're working with someone or internally, I highly encourage you to not try to just completely abstract away experts and domain experts and people that understand your audience, right? And that's how we started. That's what we are committed to doing. And anytime we've seen companies come in, we're working with a few customers that have, 1,500 pages, all AI generated garbage, and seeing zero results. And then they come in, it's like, help me fix this. It's almost like harder at that point to hit reset than starting from a good place. So figure out what great looks like, and you need those domain experts. And then you can layer in technology on top of that, which is a lot of what we're doing, right? So that was the quick intro, hopefully not too long. So now let's get into how we're thinking about this, and which is starting with the audience first and setting the right context. As a reminder, everything I'm going to show you now is with this goal in mind. Our goal is to create credible, comprehensive, and current content at scale, right? So you're not trading off speed for quality, but you're also not moving slow and not tackling the long tail of all the topics your audience cares about. And every single piece of content needs to build trust with your audience, not the opposite. And the formula here is content plus quality at scale drives increased visibility and reach, which then drives attention plus trust because it's credible content. And if you do the right things, you can convert that into distribution that then impacts your growth. So that's the like simple formula. If you're pitching this internally and like, hey, let me go invest in content and do this the right way and think more like a publisher, like a media company, this is kind of like the simplified version of that, right? And so my biggest piece of advice before I go into this is don't start with workflows. First, set the context right, and I'll show you exactly how to do that, and define quality, get to great, and then work backwards from great as you scale. And don't try to go from 0 to 100% automation or streamlining, but instead figure out where can AI do 100 times better job than humans, and where can human judgment continue to be there to shape both the strategy, the alignment, and raising the bar on quality, right? And once you do that, then you'll have confidence of what you're solving for along the way versus starting with the workflows, trying to automate, and then trying to scale garbage into gold, essentially, right? So, should we do this? All right, it's going to be fun. All right. We picked a cool example here. It's called top tax deductions for construction companies, just like a random kind of example, right? And so instead of going in and showing you how I would go and create the context for a company, I first want to show you what it would look like if we are trying to scale this with one shot, essentially. And I'm going to look at my big screen here, so bear with me for a second. All right, so let's just say like we're going to one shot this, right? Obviously, no one is doing this at all. So in a one shot, what we would write is, hey, write me an article on this topic, right? This is an overly simplified prompt. But I think there's this misconception that people think that I need to get this prompt to be super perfect, and based on that, excuse me, it's what's going to make the biggest impact on the quality. And what we're seeing is actually different. But let's just dig in a little bit. So here you see an article, and we're using GPT-5, which is a pretty decent model. It's the latest, right? And what you can see is like this doesn't look bad at face value, right? But it lacks depth, it lacks relevance. And normally what most people would do is take this and start to massage it and start to enrich it. And then eventually after an hour or two, say, either F this, I'm just going to start from scratch, or let me just copy and paste this over to a Notion doc or Google Doc and just go section by section, or everyone has kind of their different approach, right? So then I wanted to show you just a quick example here of what would change about a simple prompt like this if we had good context and just a little bit of research done, right? And so the first thing you can do is go into Perplexity or whatever your favorite thing is. You can use ChatGPT, by the way, but it's like super slow. And I actually find that Claude Deep Research is better than ChatGPT's recently. Both are pretty slow, but it might be worth it. But this is just for a quick test, right? And so the difference is in Perplexity, you can go into deep research as well, and it tends to be a lot faster. Whereas Claude and ChatGPT will pull like 500 sources. This is pulling like 50 sources, right? And so for this, I'm just using that. So it's pretty simple prompt here. You are an expert research planner. And by the way, I have all the prompts here in a Notion doc, and this time I'm actually going to send it to everyone, because last time I said I was going to and ended up not, so that's my bad. But okay, so let's go through this one. You're a expert research planner. Your role is to break down a research topic into specific focused questions and gather comprehensive information about it. Once you have that, just kind of giving a little bit of instructions. This can be better. And then I gave it just a little bit of context on the persona audience, and here's the research, right? Then in this version here, I'm taking essentially not that different of a prompt, right? Which is just write me an article. And I just gave it the research and the context, which we're going to show you right after this, how to create this in the way we do it a little bit, but also like you can tweak it to make your own. So one here is a company overview of a made up text hub, the writing guidelines, which we're going to create together here in a second, the research that I just show you the prompt in Perplexity, and then an audience persona, essentially, which is just like some description of the audience, right? And then this is what we get here. And so I think like what's really interesting is immediately I think we go from, let's just say, this version here, which is maybe 40-50% there, right? Which is not horrible, by the way, but it's not well cited, it's not fact checked, it's not as relevant, it's not structured as well, and not as well researched, to then something that actually resonates hopefully a bit better with our audience. And it has citations, it has sources. You can see here it's mentioning 2025 things versus this previous one is mentioning a lot of 2024 things, right? And that's very, very relevant because that's your expert signals, right? And you know, like from here, normally you can start to shape this, and not to say that this is now a slam dunk, call it a day, copy and paste, hit publish, but I think this already gets you a lot closer. And it wasn't about the prompt, right? It was about the quality of the context you gave, the relevance and quality of the research you gave it, and the context you gave on your audience as well, and what you're trying to accomplish, right? And so hopefully that gives you like the why. So then as we go right now into the how we'll create this context, you understand the why behind it and how big of an impact it will make into everything you're trying to create with AI tools. And then later on, we'll go step by step into kind of a more advanced version of what I just did here, which is just like a simple prompt, essentially. You know, so all right, we're good. Let's keep going then. Cool. All right. So this is the Notion doc that I'll send to everyone. It's gonna have um all the prompts that you can follow along later. And so I'm going to be referencing this doc, and then later on we'll clean it up and send it to you. And so at a high level, right, like what we're going to create is three different docs. It's the company context, it's the writing guidelines, and then the audience personas profile. And you might want to do things where if you have a very detailed product or complex or something like that, you can also do something that is more of a product artifact that describes your product. So I'll show you a few examples of that, right? And what we're not going to touch on too much, although we're defining the audience personas, we're not going to go as deep into all the topics. And so that's probably a next one that we'll do, is like how we go deep into shaping the different topics, coming up with different topic clusters. But just know that that's, you know, something we would have done at the beginning, is shape that, is understanding your audience and then mapping that to all the topics they care about. And then as we're creating content, you're executing against that, right? And then what we're not going to spend too much time on is the process of calibrating. So we're going to do like one shot in a lot of these, but then a lot of how you improve and refine these artifacts is by then applying them to an actual execution. And then once you do that, you can start to really refine the details and see where it might be falling short. So cool. So let's do this. All right. First step here. Let's go through first the company research process. All right. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of this prompt. None of these prompts, by the way, are meant to be the holy grail of prompts by any means. These are just things that you can tweak, make it your own. And, you know, if you're creating the foundation for the context that you're going to use for your entire team or for your day to day, just spend some time on this. You know your company or your context better. If you're creating context for yourself, maybe this is going to look more like a personal context artifact as opposed to a company. If you're doing it for your company, if you're going for an industry segment within your company, however you want to do it, you can tweak this, right? But the whole idea is like you want to get into all the areas that are going to be of interest, that are going to really kind of surface all the relevant inputs that later on we can use, right? Like, so everything from the origin story, business reality, what they do, market position, the people, the problems, the future, any additional recent context, like let's say there was an acquisition or something, right? And so the first step here we're going to do is, let's go here. I'm going to show you. I ran this already so that we didn't have to wait 30 minutes for this to run. So we're going to do this for Lovable, okay? Because I love Lovable and they're awesome and everyone should use them. And and so this is literally a copy and paste of the prompt, right? And so what you get here then is a pretty detailed, and make sure you do it in deep research. And again, you can also do this in ChatGPT deep research and also Claude deep research. So I'll show you in a little bit what that would look like in Claude as well, just to kind of compare. But you can see this is pretty good. It's pretty detailed. It goes into the founder a little bit. It has different timelines and milestones. This is pretty good. Obviously, if it's your company, you should know better, and you'll be able to kind of see where it's missing context or where it's not very good, right? And what this is not doing yet is like fact checking or coming, for instance, like the customer stories, like it might be pulling, okay customer stories, but maybe these are not the best ones. So you might want to tweak this. So you can really like spend some time and double down on certain sections of that, right? Cool. Okay, so now you have this. By the way, one thing to do that makes life a little bit easier, you can click export and click on Markdown, and then just save all of these as Markdown files. It makes it a lot easier to just drop these files later on. And you can use something like Cursor, which is just kind of like an editor as well, to then open up these Markdown files and use, an assistant to kind of shape it a little bit as well. And then in this case, I know that the founder has an amazing voice. He's really popular on LinkedIn and social media. And so it's really important to also do a profile on the founder. So this is the next step here, which is I'll show you the next prompt, which is kind of similar to the company research, but instead what we're doing is doing it on a person level, right? And this is more geared towards the founder / leader of a company. And it just talks about their career evolution, the founding story, a little bit more of their communication style, their interactions. Are there things that they communicated before about their values, philosophy, principles, that drive their day to day, and anything on the personal side and context that might be relevant, and philosophies. Again, like this is meant to be like a starting point or even a menu that then you can tweak or remove some sections, right? Like don't, when you're creating context, it is worth spending the time to customize this, but hopefully this helps quite a bit for everyone, All right, cool. So then from here, what we're getting is a pretty detailed background on the founder, right? So I won't spend too much time on this in going through each detail, but you can see like it's tapping into things like his fundamental mission is to democratize software creation for the 99 who can't code, right? Like there's pillars of how he thinks about first principles and generational companies and things like that. So it's really capturing a lot of that essence and nuance, but it's a lot, right? Then the next thing we can do here that is also really, really helpful is just a simple, let's find 100 quotes and reviews from customers on how they use Lovable and why they love it, right? And this also is going to help later on as we pull all of this into creating artifacts. This gives you, not just the company's perspective on something and then the founder's perspective or leader perspective on something, but then it starts to give you your customer or user's perspective on your product, your company, your brand, right? And then you can kind of speak hopefully in a similar way or in a way that resonates with that audience, and it starts to kind of capture that essence, right? And you can find like a good balance here. Obviously, if you're an early stage company, there's no reviews, this might not apply. And so you might want to do the opposite of that, which is, hey, help me identify the pain points of customers and users using my competitors' products or solution and why they hate it, right? So you can do the opposite as well, is like find the pain point. But if you've been around for a while, you can find the love and where you're hitting home with your current audience, right? Okay, cool. So now what we're doing here is, let's just show you really quickly. This is the company research piece that we did. And so in the first piece that I did, which was the company research, this is what, if you wanted to do in Claude, what it would look like. And you can see this ran for 9 minutes. and tapped into 522 sources, which is insane, right? I think the part that's really interesting, like it did pull a lot of sources from their own website, which that's positive overall, in addition to a bunch of others. And this is what it looked like on this end as well. And so sometimes what I'll do, I might run it in 2 or 3 different places, compare, or have a Claude project that already has the first version of these artifacts, and then you can start a new chat, put all of them there, and start to shape the document a little bit more, right? We won't spend a lot of time here doing that, but just know that this is the starting point, not the end point. Okay, so then what I did here is I simply put the company profile research here. And along with, so this is the research from Perplexity. This already had the research that we did here as well, so I'm using both just in case. And then I have a company profile writing prompt. So I'll show you what I have here that you can use as well. And so this is the company context. And this is mostly a prompt on how to create the first version of this artifact, and what we've seen work, to not overdo it too much and just keep it kind of simple, right? So there's sections around company overview, core services, target market, packages and pricings, and things like that, how it works, why it matters, and then a little bit of guidelines on the writing of the first version here, and some checklists and things, right? Like so it's pretty simple, nothing too crazy, and so we come here, we gave that, and we just said, now let's create a company profile for Lovable, but based on this research, right? Cool. And this is the version it came up with. And now I can share this whole chat as well, so folks can kind of go back to it and kind of see it. Although I'm sure you all with the prompts can do an even better job than I did here. Um, and um, and so now, like, we're at a pretty decent place now, right? Like where you have this company profile that you can start to use. That then what I usually would do from here is I will copy and paste this into a markdown file, or export this, and it will already start to do a much better job. And so what you can do from here is actually copy and paste this, start a project in Claude, which I'll show you in a second, and then just paste this over, right? And so if you just do this, copy here, you can create a new project, and it's asking me to upgrade a bunch of things. And so let's just do this and just say like Lovable test, create project. And the lazy way to do it is if add text and company context. And there we go. So I already have one that I did this already. I just wanted to show you the beginning step, right? And then you can add instructions as well. So cool. All right, so then from here, the next thing we're going to do is do author research. And so think of the author research. In this case, the founder is actually the author that we want to mirror. And so what we want to do is start to shape the writing guidelines and how we want to sound, right? So there's a couple approaches you can take here. So one approach is if there's your founder, your CEO, yourself, you have a unique voice, you like that, and you want to mirror that on all the writing you do, or you want to use that as a starting point, then you can do an author research on that person, which is what we did here. The other part, what you can do that works really well, is take the same exact approach, but find people that are already writing and resonating with the audience you're going after. So let's say you are going after a blue collar construction audience or something, right? Which is the example we had prior. You might want to go and find anyone that is writing for a blue collar audience and that already resonates with the blue collar audience. And then what you can do is do multiple author researches, and then later on hybrid that together and mix that in, right, as a unique voice. And it does a really good job. It takes a little bit more work. So for this example here, just to keep us on pace, I'm just going to do a simple one, which is the author research on the founder of Lovable. So with that, let me go back here. I think I have an example here of the author prompt. So I'm just going to show you the prompt. We don't need to go through the whole thing, but it's what it's doing is you put the name of an author or multiple authors, and it's gonna have the role of what I like to call a voice systems architect. And this person's goal is to reproduce, do research, and then transform it into writing systems that can be used both for humans and AI to replicate the voice, right, of that person. And so this one is really, really detailed. There's quite a bit of section here, and you might want to simplify this. There might be a bunch of different things you might want to do differently, right? And so let me just open up what we did here. And so in this one, I'm actually going to show you a different one before we go back. I just turned it into a Perplexity page, and you'll have like a link to this because this is public, and you can see the final output, right? There's kind of like this voice research report that kind of gives a lot of this kind of TLDR. And then there's a little bit of background on the person. There's some style markers that I think are kind of cool to understand. Then there's like motivations and worldview and why this person resonates. And then there's like a library of different writing examples that they've done, so that you actually have a lot of different examples. But then for each of these quotes or sentences, it actually has some markers just to kind of anchor it, right? Like almost like tags, right? Like vulnerability hook, origin story, relatable struggle, shared struggle, personal detail, authenticity. And it's really like kind of capturing a lot of that essence, and then there's a couple of things on like practical implementation, near misses, where like here's what would be off brand if they did, and here's how you would fix it, right? Again, like play around with this. There's like hooks and patterns, which is really, really cool, of like how they do these kind of like patterns of like start this, then do this and do that in their writing. There's archetypes. These are just things that like I wanted to give you all everything possible that we could think of a little bit, and then you can sort out and play with it and see what actually works.
Yeah, I think this might be a good place to stop. We have some
Yeah.
questions on maybe just a little bit more on like, hey, you're creating this artifact. How is it going to end up getting used?
Yeah.
This one in particular, we're almost like shaping the voice of a person.
Yeah.
Can you go into a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll kind of skip ahead a little bit on kind of like what the final output will look like. But let me open up the projects and just show you kind of what the final output looks like here, right? And so in this case, you have this writing guideline that now has a lot more concrete examples and is shaped based on an actual persona or archetype or combination of archetypes, versus if you try to do this from scratch and you just say, hey, let me just figure out what I want to sound like, or you take a mediocre or okay blog post that you have and you just run an LLM on it and say, hey, create a style guide based on this. It just doesn't do well because it doesn't have the same depth. It doesn't have the same essence onto it. It doesn't have enough examples to pull from. So this is almost like accelerating that. And what we found is if you do that, it's one of the things that impacts quality, stylistic quality, and consistency the most, right? And so from this, it's both a starting point that I'll show you here in a second, like how we're using it in the execution, but it can also be used as a post-processing step where throughout any workflows or prompts that you're using, you can keep referencing the writing guideline and saying, by the way, make sure you follow the writing guideline closely. Hey, follow the writing guideline more closely. And you can keep using this as a kind of a North Star. But then what you can do is anytime you run into issues where you're like, hey, this thing is just not doing well stylistically, you can figure out why it's not doing that, and then go and update the writing guidelines. So if anyone's used Cursor or Claude Code, there's like this concept like Claude.md or Cursor rules, or Augment has the same thing, right? And this is kind of this, like it's one of the rules. It sets the context, and it's a living document that you're constantly updating. All right, perfect. Okay, cool. So then like what we do after that, and I promise this is the last piece here, and then we can go into the final and section and actually go step by step here is now what we're trying to do is take all those quotes And hopefully you already created a Claude project. You put those two artifacts already in there, the writing guidelines and the company context. And now what you can do is start to um, add the quotes and reviews, and then we're going to create, there's another prompt in there as well, the audience personas and profile, right? And so this is a pretty simple approach to just define who your persona and audience is. And it can be multiple. In this case, persona one is the non-technical founder. And it's tackling things like their daily reality, fears, motivations, trust builders, killers, and critical pain points. And then the goal here is you can shape this however you want. Don't go too crazy. But then when we're creating content, you can reference this piece of content is for this audience. And you have the writing guideline, right? So if we go back to the example we had earlier, right, that's what we did here, which was, if you go up here, you had the writing, the overview, the writing guidelines, and the research and the audience personas as well. And that's what helped shape it to be a lot better. So cool. All right. Again, I'm going to share this so folks can replicate it. And I know it feels like I probably spent too much time on the context piece, but it's reflective of how important it is. If you don't get this right, then the chances of scaling quality are very, very difficult without having to spend an obscene amount of manual time all the time reworking outputs, right? So cool. All right, so now let's go through step by step on how we scale the content. And a couple of things to keep in mind as we do that are some of these factors that I covered last time, which is, for some of the things that AI answers are rewarding consistently are research content that's research and attributed, comprehensive, the reputation of your brand, but also how up to date it is. If you try to use any of these services and you ask, hey, why did you use these sources? It will tell you. It will tell you that these sources are the most recent reputable ones that are well researched. It will literally tell you this as well, right? And authority signals of like showing that you know what you're talking about, or the person that's the author knows or is an expert in the topic, how well structured, how easy to read it is, right? And so that's what we want to replicate here. So, all right. So there's a couple of things on the step-by-step here that I want to walk you through. And so what I want to do is show you each one of these steps, and we're going to go through a little bit fast, but I'm going to show you a little bit of the prompts behind it and at a high level how we do this. So, and hopefully there's like lessons learned here. We're not able to go through every little line and run live. We'll probably do a longer 4 or 5 hour workshop that we do that. It's just for this one, it's mostly like accelerating the time to insight, hopefully, right? And so one of the things that has changed recently though is that there's kind of two approaches we take. One is deterministic and another one is agentic. And so what that means is like the deterministic approach is like truly like LLM steps with some tool calling, going step by step. And then over time, as we gain confidence in that, then we can start to set evaluations. And once you're confident in evaluating a section of your entire end-to-end workflow, because you have experts involved every step of the way, then you can create agentic loops where the agents are looping through these processes and checking on an evaluation. And once that evaluation and criteria passes, then it finishes the process, right? But I highly recommend almost like expanding the process first before you try to collapse it. And that's just something that has worked really well. The only way to expand is by having expert processes mirror within your workflows and that are based on working backwards from quality. And then once you collapse, you need to have confidence in your evals and what you're doing, right? And so let's just go one by one here at a high level. This is roughly the process we follow for a lot of customers, but it's highly customized, right? And so the first step is the assignment brief, especially if it's more of an SEO angle, where the opportunity you're flagging from an SEO perspective, but you can shape the assignment differently, right? And so really quickly here, what we're doing is either starting with a URL or starting with a keyword. And again, like there's very different ways on how we do this for thought leadership or interview based, or, so this is just one approach that works. And what it's doing, it's fetching the URL, analyzing the results, and then turning this into a brief, right? And so at a high level, the way to kind of think about it is like you're an expert analyzing search results, look for relevance, and here's all this context. And I think what you see as we kind of run through a lot of these examples is that everywhere we're pulling the context that we worked on, right? And so the benefit of having that is that whether you're using a workflow tool, you can reference as a variable, or or if the tools you're using has retrieval, or if you're using like Cloud Project or something else, you can reference the name of the file, right? And then keep that consistent. And it makes a huge, huge difference because now you can keep reference this one point, so you don't need to keep tweaking the prompts. You can just keep improving the context you have, right? And I can run through some of these executions here, but like the output might look like, here's an example, and there's like a bunch of different steps here. And then the final assignment will be a brief to just give a high level angle of what we're trying to do, right? Then on the researcher, there's kind of two steps here, and this all can be replicated either in Perplexity or any other like ChatGPT, Deep Research, or Claude, right? But the way we go about this is you take all this context and you take an assignment context, and what you're trying to do there is generate research questions. And then you're trying to go through those questions and figure out if those are the right set of questions, and figure out if a set of domains or a set of sources you want to go after, and then go do research on that. In this case, we parallelize everything so it's faster and more powerful. And then you have a step that combines all of those together, right? Again, I know this is high level, but hopefully it's useful. And over time, like we'll expose more and more of these prompts because like we want others to be able to help or use it, right? And so the research step that I did earlier that I have in our prompts here kind of combine this. You're an expert research planner. Your role is to break down our research into specific goals, right? And then from here, you have a domain selector that kind of has the same thing. And you can see these prompts are not like crazy, right? But it has the context of the company every step of the way. And then same thing here, right? It's finding the right citations. And so I'll go through later and add more and more of these prompts here. It's just these prompts are very, very complex. So we're trying to simplify them so that others can use more easily as well, right? And then this is probably one of my favorite ones recently that we built. And this is where even if you don't have a system that's agentic, I think it's really cool to do almost kind of like a chain of thought process that is more agentic. And so what this does, just at a high level, right, it's going to generate a research plan and then execute the research questions, synthesize the result, evaluate each one of those, and then see if it met the eval criteria. And if it didn't, it's going to keep looping through it and then synthesize everything, which is pretty cool. But just to give maybe an example here of that, where what it's doing is it's coming up with this research plan, and there's different research modes, and it's coming up with a research objective and a target audience and how deep it needs to go in different queries. And then for each query, it's figuring out what is the success criteria for that query, how critical it is to meet that success criteria, what are some of the source requirements necessary, what tool to call, and then it's going to loop through all of those in parallel and synthesize those results, but also evaluate if it meets the criteria or not, and then eventually combine all of it into this massive research brief, right? And all of this, by the way, like we're doing this to be able to systematize a lot of it, but all of this can be replicated. It just might require a little bit longer waiting times if you're using Perplexity or ChatGPT, and it just might require a little bit more advanced prompting to go through it, but I really don't think this is like only we're able to do it necessarily. But hopefully the thought process behind it helps you a little bit. And so I'm gonna speed through it, and I think what I can do is just like record a lot of these later on. But those are kind of like the steps we follow. Then from there, after we have the research, then if you, it's really helpful to do an outline section. And then in the outline, what you're trying to figure out is the kind of the scaffolding of what you want to tackle, right? But ideally at that point, if this is more of a thought leadership, you might want to actually be highly opinionated on that. So you might want to start with like a set of bullet points of things you want to create here, right? And this is where a lot of our editors are shaping this at this point quite a bit, right? So you're taking the research, you may be reading the research, figuring out a couple of different angles and sequence of how you want to address those topics, right? And then you have a plan to execute against.
Maybe we can breeze through this part. We have a few questions. The themes of some of the questions really is like kind of tying it all together. So one of the questions is, there are tools out there that kind of like one shot or, at least from the point of view of the user, kind of give it a topic, it spits out an article. What's the point of kind of spending all this time breaking it down like this?
Yeah, that's a great point. So maybe this is helpful from an actual like example, like end to end. So that will actually help make sense of the why. But at the end of the day, like when you're going into a really detailed topic, right, or any topic at all, and like the difference is, do you want the audience that's actually reading this to actually find a topic credible and that you really know what you're talking about? Or do you want to optimize so that maybe you can hack your way to getting a little bit of visibility or some clicks temporarily, but then the actual human reading the piece of content or consuming clearly knows that this is garbage or this is not great, right? Like, and so if you don't go through these steps, there's just no way to really scale quality. And what we find is that if you scale quality and it's well researched, well cited, and hits on all those marks that we talked about, it won't only build trust with your audience, it will actually do well in citations. But also there's like a lot of nuances, right? So one of the examples that I like to bring up recently is like the Augment code one, where right before we publish a piece of content, if you like some of these answers had no idea Augment code was existed, right? But then once it started to cite them and mention them, it's also doing it in a way that actually changes the conversation, And so, for instance, like multi-repo indexing in this topic, like that wasn't even part of this answer over here. So it was almost like wasn't a relevant topic whatsoever. But because Augment code inserted itself into this conversation and did it in a way that wasn't shallow or shitty or, irrelevant, it actually almost did this inception where it says, hey, actually, you're not thinking about this topic the right way. This is how you should think about this topic, right? And that level of depth for most businesses, you're not going to get from a one shot in an LLM that's trained with outdated data or that doesn't have the context of that,
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, that's the key. It's like to actually get cited. It's not just like having something out there, it needs to be quality, it needs to be, referenced, it needs to be recent. And at least from our experience, like if you don't break it down into all these steps and start tweaking it depending on who the customer is, what the content type is, like it's never a one size fits all. Like unless you're doing that, you just can't push that bar,
Yeah.
And the truth is, like a lot of this stuff is super easy now in a lot of tools to have something out there, and your job is to do something better because if it takes you one button click, somebody's pressing that button 1,000 times.
Any other questions you think?
Let's see. I think there were some questions just around like kind of like, does AI content still get treated differently? It was like a little bit earlier. I mean, do you have a take on kind of creating content with AI and if, that in itself is getting penalized?
Yeah, like the way I kind of think about it is, it's not about whether AI was involved whatsoever in all the steps. It's more about, are you gaining a deep understanding of your audience and becoming by far the best, most credible resource for as many of the questions and things that your audience needs help with along their journey that eventually will lead to you and your product, right? Like, so for instance, like with, let's just say like Ramp, whether you're searching for just an informational thing, sure, it might not be driving a ton of clicks, but they're a great resource for that, right? Whether you're searching for pricing and comparison data on a bunch of vendors, or whether you're looking for per diem data, or, what is the category for this expense? Like what we're trying to do is understand the audience at a deeper level and map it all and really start to become by far the best answer. And so skill, I think, to a lot of the questions now is also like relative, right? Like, and so for me, it's almost like a map. So your audience has all these topics and things that they care about where it would be helpful for you to be a great resource to them. And it's about how important is it for you to be by far the best resource in all those areas in this map, right? And so skill is about how quickly do you need to be that? And also, once you have that surface area, how do you keep that up to date, fresh, and always improving at least every month or every 3 months, worst case scenario, right? And that's, I think, part of it is kind of like you're planting these seeds, but although content is compounding as you plant and nurture these seeds, it's also decaying if you do nothing. And the thing is, because of AI answers, the half-life of the decay is getting shorter and shorter. So it's decaying a lot faster. And that's what we're seeing, where it's like I don't know if anyone saw like Monday.com, right? Like, in lower quality content and losing a lot of their traffic, their stock dropping by 30-40%. And I think that's what's happening, is like companies where before, if they kind of left it off to the side, were okay. Now they're like, crap, now I got to catch up, And so the way we think about it is not like thousands necessarily, but it's like, can you do it daily? And can you send these signals daily? And every day, can you watch signals and act on those signals?
Yep, makes sense. There's a question kind of around AI detector tools. I mean, to be honest, like, we don't put a ton of faith in those. We probably used to run them a little bit, but
Yeah.
honestly, the bar for us is like, what is the point of all this content, right? Like, you're writing it to solve a problem for somebody, and that's the bar we're trying to meet. And like, the point of whether an AI is writing it or not, like, I mean, at least, what I end up saying to clients is a lot is like, hey, you have a budget for content every month. Are you going to spend it on some guy writing words in a Word doc where you're regimenting, hey, don't use ChatGPT? Or are you going to use it, go out, do some research, talk to customers, build product, and learn, and like spread that to the world to actually help somebody, So
Yeah, like a great example of this is like, it's not that AI is writing everything. It's like, if a human spends tens of hours setting the right context and making the right judgment calls, right? And then identifies all these right opportunities, and AI helps research and find those. And then they're executing, and then every step of the way, they're raising the bar, shaping, directing, and instructing and improving it, right? And then at the end of all of that, they're still doing a big pass and improving and tweaking and adding that personalization, right? And that's just the beginning. And then later on, they're coming and adding additional examples, enriching it and whatnot. Like, yes, absolutely, like AI is involved, but I think it's not necessarily like quote unquote AI generated content, right? And I think there's like, it's clear that it's that. But also, like, there's areas where humans are just not going to do a good job. Like, if you have 1,000 pages, cross-linking, doing CTAs the right way, updating those CTAs, inserting your brand in the right way that's not too salesy. There's a lot of that it can just add value. And so it's just the role of the expert becomes different over time and starts to evolve. And I think brands that just don't embrace that are just not going to be able to scale and move as fast with quality.
yeah, makes sense. I know we're on time, but I mean, we could stick around for a few more minutes and answer questions. Let's see. We got one on, once you have all these prompts from the good group, how much of it is automated and human? Honestly, I think it's so different based on customer. Like, I guess the trend is like, we are building a machine with kind of humans in the loop, and over time it gets more automated. But I'd say at the beginning it's like almost like very much human. It's like exactly what Marcel did today, right? Where it's like a human in there all the time shaping it. And then over time, at some point it becomes very little, and the human is there to
Yeah,
kind of.
it's like it changes, right? Like I worked at a company that did a lot of data labeling and human expert data, that is a lot of the training data and that goes into training these models. And Surge AI is one of our biggest customers now, and they're amazing expert data, and the way I kind of think about it is on one way, there's what we call like expert process data. And so think of it as like all the thought processes along the way. It's just that with content creation, sometimes people think of it as like, oh, that's not necessarily expert. Whereas like how people create a demand letter or an M&A doc, if they're a lawyer, is considered expert, right? Like, and so it's just like sometimes the word content gets washed out. And so for us, it's not like necessarily changing what we're like, or necessarily saying experts are going to go away and it's going to be all AI. I think it's like I said before, it's just the role is going to change. Maybe it's more of architecting the processes. It's more maybe having the taste or understanding what great looks like or reviewing something. It's like it's getting better inputs. It's like talking to other humans and asking better questions and ingesting better inputs and drawing the lines and connecting the dots. Or it's like continuously raising the bar and shaping it. And it's just a creative process. Like creativity comes from like creating on top of something else. It doesn't come from creating on out of thin air. And so I think like AI and these workflows just help you accelerate time to ideas, insights, and collaboration and creation and creativity overall versus like staring at a blank piece of paper or a blank cursor.
Cool. I think we'll I mean end it there. There's a lot more questions. I mean, I'll just say one thing that we honestly still haven't publicly announced is like all this is kind of in our community, which we're calling AI-led growth. So, you've seen in 1 hour, there's only so much we can get through. We're gonna essentially have like a full course. Like I could spend 2 hours just talking about how you research properly, to make sure your content is good. And we'll share a link with
Yeah, we'll
everyone
share a
here.
link and folks can check out ailedgrowth.com. We haven't like fully announced but we'll be announcing very soon, but folks can join already. There's several people that have already joined, and the goal is we're going to continue to put content here. We're not gating a lot, but we are going to start to charge for certain things eventually, very, very little. And the goal is not because we need the money necessarily. It's because we want this to be a truly like independent community that we can keep reinvesting and having community managers improving the content. And hopefully you've all seen the value and I appreciate all the feedback, super, super excited. And we'll keep doing these. I think the next one we're going to do on identifying the right topics and opportunities and how to map out that content strategy and topic map against your audience. So appreciate you all. I hope you have, for those in the US, amazing Labor Day weekend and coming up. And for those in Europe and other places, I appreciate you joining as well. So have a good one, everyone. Talk soon.
Thank
Cheers.
you.